Hello, friends, and welcome back to Chasing Hazel's Tales, the podcast where we deep dive into our family histories and discoveries, discuss our friend DNA, and talk about the wonderful connections we have made along the way. I'm Kim McLaughlin.
And I'm Laura Ireland. And for today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about Hazel's early life, her family and her hometown, and we bring receipts.
Or as genealogists like to say, we can cite our sources. So in October 10th is the 76th anniversary of Hazel's passing. I just wanted to mention that because every October I remember it. And I usually do a Facebook post or something about Hazel on special dates, and maybe I'll do that again. So we have just a few housekeeping bits left over from our last episode.
And one of them being, you might ask, nobody ever talked about Hazel. How did we put the pieces of her life together?
And so again, from the genealogist point of view, our sources are the usual, our basic sources, the usual birth, marriage, and death records, newspaper clippings, obituaries, census returns. Of course, I love census returns. That's where we got basically the sad facts about Hazel, meaning all we had were names and dates, nothing in between.
But the best sources, we wouldn't know anything without what Hazel's brother Carl did. He squirreled away everything, all the letters that were written, every basically receipt, document, photograph, everything it appears from his life, he saved, and we dug through it.
And so apparently he saved everything from his parents' life, from
True.
Everything.
Yeah, not just his own.
I am currently staring at Roscoe Lang's driver's license. So if that doesn't okay, so he saved his father's driver's license. That's just an example of all the things that we have. We'll call them receipts.
We tried to come up with some cute nicknames for him, something like person who keeps every piece of paper ever generated and touched by him, or maybe man who never owned a trash bag. I don't know.
I did a presentation once and I called him the keeper of all things memorable. And that's the most
That's probably accurate. Much better.
Well, for me, because everything he kept was memorable. But, so I tried to call him a pack rat, and I said, no, that doesn't fit, because he wasn't squirreling it away for no good reason. He was just squirreling it away. And sometimes I wonder, did he hope that someday someone would actually find it and read it and be interested in it? Because if he did, if that was his goal, then we're in it.
Winner, chicken dinner.
That's us. But then also, so Carl was the one who saved everything, and basically all this stuff was out in his garage. But by extension, our sister Kathy was able to put everything away once they passed, and was able to collect it and put it together so that it wasn't thrown out.
Right. And if she hadn't done that, then, we wouldn't be talking about Hazel today, I don't think.
That would have been the end. So we're thankful to them both. And who needs books when we've got this stuff to read? Because it's reading the story of your own life or how you got here.
Right. So last week we talked a little bit about DNA. We love the study of all of it, the matches, the everything it creates for us.
And we think just because we know it, that everybody must know what a centimorgan is, and everybody must know all these other things, but evidently, that's not true. But I did want to take a minute regarding DNA, and I want to put a shout out to one of my favorite groups, and they're called a DIG meeting, which means DNA Interest Group. And I learned about them when I was in a meeting for the Greater Portland chapter of the Maine Genealogical Society. And the person at the helm is Nancy Mason. And we meet in Gray once a month. And I have many new friends there, and very thoughtful and interesting people who help people learn about DNA and make sense of what they've seen and what they've learned. So it's a really great group to be part of. And I want to say thank you to the DIG group.
Okay. So, pretty much all the time we can be heard to be talking about DNA or something, family gathering, phone calls, whatever. And we talk a little bit about how the ethnicity estimates make us a little crazy sometimes, but yet it's just a fun puzzle to figure out. I have 3 daughters, and looking at their DNA results, because like we said, all of us have tested, marveling at the the different ways that mine and my husband's DNA was passed down to them, the different mixes of what they received for their ethnicities. And, it's endlessly fascinating to me how DNA can bring answers to unsolved crimes, solving those cold cases, and helps to explain why a person might be more susceptible to diseases like cancer. And they're discovering more and more DNA links with diseases every day. And in our case, it showed us the truth of how we arrived here in this life.
Right. And so we're not going to be teaching DNA. We'll try to explain it as best we could on how we used it. And there are several ways to do family history research using DNA. We're focusing on what they call autosomal, which is what all that Ancestry does. It's called autosomal testing. And it's very useful, but it depends on what you want to know. But for us, we're just going to be going on the autosomal path. And there's two different descriptions of important terms that we use. One of them is called centimorgans, and the other one is NPEs.
So our DNA matches are identified to us, once you test with Ancestry or whichever test you might use, you will see the people who match to you through DNA, and they are identified by units of measure called centimorgans. It's not a physical measurement like inches or pounds, but it's a measurement of how much DNA you share with somebody.
And then I have to mention, Laura and I probably both do this. I'm a nurse, and I don't know how many times I've wanted to say centimorgans instead of centimeters, or, it's like,
that's because your brain is always on DNA.
I know. Well, and it is. It's like, excuse me, doctor, what centimorgan needle do you need? I don't know how many times I've stopped myself short and said, no, not centimorgans, centimeter. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So.
And this becomes really important when you're trying to figure out how someone's connected to you, but it won't tell you the why. You're kind of on your own on that one.
Right. You'll just know that by the amount of centimorgans you share, you'll know if it's a close or a distant relative. And if it's a close relative, it's sometimes easier to find out. But, it's getting so much more clever that the programs are doing a lot more of that work for you. Join the fun.
Right. The recent addition of determining which DNA you got from parent 1 and parent 2.
Right. That's good.
That was really fun to look at. It made me a little sad though to be able to see, we have mom's DNA she tested.
Yeah.
But of course we didn't have dad's because he passed in 2000.
Yeah.
But to see that, I just got a little, I don't know, I'd call it wistful.
Yeah.
Looking at that and wishing, he would love this stuff.
Yeah. He would. He was so clever. And I think that he would soak that right up.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, depending on how close you are related to someone, a parent relationship can be about 3,400 centimorgans. The closer relative you are, the higher the centimorgans. 34 is about, is that the highest? Just about?
I think that's 34 and change.
Right. And it very little change because it doesn't vary much when you're a parent. It's just because you get.
I think mine with the 3 girls I think it's within 10 or 15 centimorgans.
Yeah.
How much DNA we share. So,
yeah. And that's ding, 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 ding. You've got a parent or a child right there.
Right.
But there's so much to it. And, I don't want to talk about twins because that just makes my head spin. Twins and identical twins marrying identical twins. And I can't talk about it.
That's a different topic.
Yeah.
But, one of the first things that I think we noticed is that when you're looking at your matches and because we all have tested and you look at how much you share and say what your sister shares with a common relative, and the amounts are not the same. And they could be pretty significantly different, but it usually does fall within an expected range.
And ours are. When we were doing our research, we would find that, Laura and I had a big gap of, between, like, I was on the low end and she'd be on the high end and vice versa. And someday we just need to sit down and think about that, because it's like, whose did I get? Whose DNA did I get that you didn't get? That kind of thing.
Right.
That's another topic right there.
Another example of that is a grandparent relationship. So just briefly, my girls are fortunate enough to have a grandparent from each side having tested with the DNA. And that relationship is supposed to be around 1,700 centimorgans on average. And it's perfectly true, because with their paternal grandfather, the range that my girls share is from 1,310 to 2,159. And then with the maternal grandmother, it goes from 1,488 to 2,100. And, just a quick little look at it, you can see that the average really is right around 1,700. So,
right. So you proved it right there.
Yeah.
You've got the whole scale right there.
Yeah, it really fills my nerd heart.
Yeah.
to see that kind of thing.
And we have nerd hearts. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And so when the amounts are smaller too, another thing that we noticed is once you get out to the more distant connections, there are some that you don't share with your full siblings. There's
Right. You'll match them and I won't, or vice
right,
versa. Yeah.
right.
So, and that doesn't mean you're not related to them. It just means that we didn't catch the same DNA. That's all.
Right. Yeah. It just matters what you inherited from which parent and how they're
Yep.
connected to that person. So,
Right. So we won't go, we could spend weeks on, centimorgans, but we won't because we put people to sleep. But the other
Yeah.
term that we use when we do our DNA is not parent expected, which we discussed in the last episode. Basically, it's an event which happens in about 1 to 10% of births, which means it's just a technical term, meaning someone takes a DNA test and finds out that their parent is not who they expected. So it's
or maybe a grandparent.
Exactly. Like something's funny, but so the data varies and it depends on, what population and what time frame and things like that. So, but we're not here to debate that. But basically, we just want you to know that that is part of our journey. And one of the things that we discuss on quite a frequent basis. So our own NPE was not for ourselves. Basically, it was a generation back. But
Right.
it took us a while and we finally figured out, it's been a long journey. And I think now Ancestry might be doing all this before we know it,
Right.
if you're interested in taking a test. We were both very glad, to know what we know.
Right.
'Cause it's very interesting and very truth-telling and very historical. And it gives you something to really think about. And
it kind of gave me a new appreciation and a new understanding of the generations that went before us.
Oh, an appreciation for sure.
Life was different and these things were hidden and secrets were taken to the grave. And, DNA is kind of blowing that out of the water. There's no hiding. And I don't think it happens that often anymore.
Right.
I'm not, I can't really speak with any authority on that.
No, but for us, when we first did our DNA test, there were no Burgoyne matches. We did not match one person via DNA for a Burgoyne.
And, at first I did not feel startled by that. I thought to myself, well, maybe people haven't tested.
Yep. Because
it was the naive little side of my brain that just,
But also not many people that we knew had taken tests at that time.
Right.
I mean, so it was now there's a lot more, but at that time we thought, well, no, they haven't tested. No big deal. But what happened was there's this thing called the Leeds method. And I did a Leeds clustering chart where what you do is you separate your matches into grandparents. This one goes to this grandparent and this one goes to that grandparent. And you can tell from the closer matches which those are. And so I got matches for mom's side of the family, and there was, one for the grandmother, one for the grandfather. And then I got matches for Grammy Hazel on that side of the family, because I knew some of the family anyway from the biological family. Yeah. But then there was nobody for the grandfather, for my dad's father. There was no name I reckon. There was nobody close. Zero. So
then there were those other ones that we couldn't.
But they came later, because at one point.
Yeah, it was later. Yeah.
Yeah, but at one point there were none. And that's almost, because I would say none. How can there be none? It's 15 million people who test. How can there be none? And there was none anyway. So, but then after a while there was some, and we're going, who's this guy? That's another story. Right. We'll get to that later. Yeah. But just so you know, that's how we came to learn about NPEs.
Right. Through personal experience.
Right. And Google.
Right. All right. Well, let's catch up with Hazel then. If you remember, we really didn't know much about our grandmother except for those sad facts. Her birth name was Julia Hazel Hensler. Such a pretty name, Julia Hazel. We really like that. And we last saw her in the children's home in Augusta, Maine in 1910, after her mother and her grandmother had died. And it appears that the children were all in different locations, I guess, in 1910. And there were 6 older siblings. And they were scattered around to the homes of the Connery aunts and uncles. And that family's been on the island since the early 1700s. Her father, Julius Hensler, was a German immigrant who married into the Connery family on Deer Isle, Maine.
Right. And so we don't know much about any of the circumstances, like how the children got distributed where. We know that 6 went to live with aunts and uncles. But we do know that Julius, who was Hazel's father, moved to Lewiston and started a new family. We tried to figure this out. Like, we just didn't know that what was going on, but we now have details. But I remember talking to a family member of the Hensler side, and they mentioned that Julius moved to Lewiston because there was a German community there. And he wanted to live there because he could have people that that spoke German and had the same culture, so to speak. So being a German immigrant on Deer Isle must have been, we're just trying to understand him. Like, what would make you leave Deer Isle? It's gorgeous. But if you're a German immigrant and there's been Connerys on that island since 1700s, I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to be with more German people. Yeah.
I'm sure, like a lot of Maine communities, he was from away, so maybe was a little different than everybody else, and he probably just wanted that common connection that wasn't there for him,
right? I guess. And so I don't know. Here we are 100 plus years later trying to figure it out. Really? Why did you move from Deer Isle? I can't believe it.
I know, it is beautiful.
Yeah. So anyway, we don't know really how long Hazel was in the orphanage. We can only imagine that must have been difficult. It must have been some time because the census wasn't done until the fall, and Hazel's mother had died in June. I mean, so there's some time, and then 1910 was the next year. So I'm thinking about maybe a year. Do you think? I mean, I'm thinking a year or more.
I think at a minimum, it's probably close to a year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's kind of what we thought. And that's got to have some sort of effect on a child, a baby. But as it turns out, she was adopted
type of things.
Right. What did you call it?
Attachment. Like, I don't know. I think it's a common thing depending on how well the children are cared for,
right?
How much attention they receive.
Right. So it does turn out she was adopted by a really great couple named Roscoe and Georgia Lang. And they lived in Enfield, and they were pretty well known in Enfield, the late 1800s and early 1900s, as business people. And do you want to know why I know that? Because I have every business receipt he ever wrote in the late 1800s and 1900s. And he was
pictures of the business and all sorts of stuff.
And deeds. I mean, there are so many deeds that have his name on it that he must have been not a wheeler dealer, but he was busy. He was an active participant in business and commerce and all those things in this small little village. So,
right. And Georgia too, with being the postmaster plus raising the family and probably tending to the store and all those things. And I hear she made some good butter. I'm not sure, but I think that's somewhere.
How do we know that? Because
there's a letter.
There's a letter because we have receipts. The Lang family was fairly influential or at least present in the Enfield community. And Roscoe Lang's father and brother worked for the Maine Central Railroad, which at the time was a big part of everyday life in Maine. As one cousin told me, it was the I-95 of the time. I mean, that's how you got from point A to point B. And, Maine Central Railroad is something that will come up again. Hazel knew about the Maine Central Railroad. So
that will certainly come up later.
Yeah. And we have big newspaper clippings that congratulated the Lang family, the two older, Roscoe's father and brother, for 96 years as section foreman.
Wow.
Together they served. I mean, can you imagine? That's a lot. One of them was 50-year employee. The other one was 46. Wow. So that's a long time. They were Langs there for a long time. Yeah. So all appearances, they were pretty well off. One thing we have in our possession, I call it a long wallet. So it's Roscoe Lang's long wallet. It's if you could picture it, it's like a leather wallet that someone would put in their breast coat, of a business jacket or a nice jacket. And inside that long wallet were deeds. I mean, just deeds, lots of deeds. And so he was, I just think that he was very industrious. He had deeds, he had stocks, Farmers Union correspondence, and he was the treasurer of the Enfield Farmers Union. How do I know that? Because I have I have that correspondence.
His membership number? Do you have his membership number? Well, and after they adopted Hazel, they also went on to adopt a son, Carl Lang. He was 3 years younger than Hazel. And, Enfield is it's a typical small town, rural Maine. It's about 30 miles north of Bangor. It usually had around 1,000 to 1,200 people. I think probably as far back as the 1900s and probably still today. I'm not sure, but never more than a few general stores and a post office and that historic Maine Central Railroad station depot. And it really hadn't changed that much when we were growing up. You know, when we lived there, we had one blinking traffic light out in West Enfield. I'm guessing it wasn't there in the early 1900s, but, you know, otherwise just a few stop signs and lots of great people.
And I just wanted to mention that when Dad was in the Marines and when he was retired from the Marines, we came home to Enfield to live. We were just young. Laura and I were just young, but we went to live in the house attached to the Lang General Store. So
yeah, that was our first home in Enfield.
Yep. We lived in that house. And so now we have pictures of it from way back when it was a beautiful building and huge. And I don't know, I always thought the house was really quite neat. I just loved, it was just an old New England farmhouse, but I loved it.
And you know, I think our biggest source of recreation in Enfield was Coldstream Pond, or Prestige Puddle, as Dad used to call it. You know, one of those beautiful spring-fed lakes with the famous Flag Island. And it was pretty much a hot social spot for Enfield. And I think he probably more so that when in like Dad's generation and maybe Hazel's too, I don't know.
I think it was a destination for people in the summer.
It could be, you know, because they used to have that water slide at Morgan's Beach, and they had a roller skating rink out there, and those things weren't there when we were growing up.
And they were big. And I've got pictures that, of course, that Carl kept that have pictures of Coldstream Pond and people building cottages at the turn of the century. And it's, you know, it's just, there's a lot of people. So yeah. I think it was a hot spot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Mom's family would go on to, the Smith family would go on to build that camp when she was, I don't know how old, teenager.
Yeah, they spent time there as a teenager. Yep.
So, and that's still in the family. Surprising.
Yeah. Oh, and we also have to mention our claim of fame, because Laura and I, and we had some friends.
I think it drives our family crazy.
Yeah, but I know, because we don't crow about much, but we have to crow about this. And so when we were in, I don't know, we were probably young high schoolers. Or
I picture like 10 to 12 for me.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. And we had friends all over the lake, and all summer long, all we did was just go from house to house and swim all the time. We swam from morning till night. But the big claim to fame is when there's an island in the middle, not in the middle of the Coldstream Pond. Andy will think I'm exaggerating a little, but there's a big island that has blueberries and a flag on it, and it's just come to represent Coldstream Pond. Well, we as youngins decided we were going to swim to that island and have some blueberries, and we did. And and I even confirmed that with a friend a couple of weeks ago. I said, did we really? I mean, and she goes, oh yeah, she remembers doing it, and it was great.
I absolutely remember doing it. And yeah,
so
that
you
was
probably remember the swim. I remember the blueberries.
I remember the blueberries too. We used to haunt that island pretty much. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's, I mean, how much fun is that? I mean, those are the memories we have of Coldstream Pond.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully Hazel enjoyed some of that fun like we did. And from all that we've seen in pictures and academic records, Hazel was a really good student. She seemed to be raised well. She was dressed well. There's quite a few, I mean, for that time period, quite a few pictures of her. And she looks like a happy young girl. She's dressed nicely. The scenery is just very nice. She had there was a nice doll in some of her pictures with her. And of course, we have her 8th grade spelling book, which Carl kept, I guess. And she must have been pretty bright. She got 100 on every page.
I'm thinking maybe he couldn't spell and he used that as his little dictionary or something.
I don't know, maybe.
Hazel, the good speller. Mom liked Hazel's spelling or something.
Yeah. So then she graduated from Howland High School in 1928, and the yearbook for her, it gives a little bit of a glimpse into her personality. She was voted liveliest, and along with her picture, it said, Bud is the most vivacious member of the class. And whenever you feel hungry at recess time, just go to Hazel. She always has a bag of popcorn or candy.
Right. They only had 15 people in her class or something, but her favorite senior song was listed, I Wish You Were Jealous of Me. So there you go. That's one thing I need to Google, because I don't think I've
heard that song.
Yeah, I think we need, what should we be reading into that? I don't know, but that's another thing for us to do. So she was in the senior play, and her favorite quote was listed, push on, keep moving. I don't know what that means, but maybe she said it a lot. Maybe that was just a family kind of thing that they said. So for all that we can see, she was a popular person, and it seems like she had a positive experience in school. All of her grades and all of her comments seemed to be really, really nice. So that just gives us a little bit of happiness to see that, she was okay.
Okay. And we also want to give you a little bit of information about her brother Carl, because he did play such a significant role in allowing us to learn these things about our grandmother. So Carl Roscoe Lang, he was a World War II vet. He received a Purple Heart, and the document is in the paperwork that I have with the list of the people who received the Purple Heart along with him at the same time. So,
Aw.
yeah. And,
Oh.
he was a big part of our history research. And
Nobody
we did know.
There was nobody we recognized, was there?
No.
No, he was just, yeah.
Yeah, he's in the list.
Okay.
And so we knew our Uncle Carl. He was very fortunate to live well into his 90s, passing away in 2006. And he was married to Hattie Falloon in a marriage that would span more than 70 years. Did he go more than 75 years?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. We'll have to look that up.
I would have to do math.
Yeah. But anyway, and Carl loved to talk about history, and Hattie didn't. And I think it was a sign of the times, as I don't think she wanted people discussing Carl's adoption, maybe, or, of course, it appears there might have been a few family secrets, and maybe she just didn't want things talked about. I don't know. But she was a formidable person. And if she didn't want him talking about it, he didn't.
Yeah.
So even though we knew Carl, there was really no family history talk.
Right. She was pretty old school when it came to family history and stories or secrets or whatever. She just didn't want to talk about it. And one time my mother told me they used to go to this place in Enfield. They called it the Elders Club. It would meet at the town office, and it was just a group of retired persons who would go and they would share different events. And I don't know if it was weekly or every other week, but they would go and they would have a good time with their peers. And so one time they had Carl presenting on the history of Enfield. And I mean, who better to present on the history of Enfield than Carl? He knew everybody, has been there his whole life for, at that point it would have been 70 years.
And his garage contained half of the history of Enfield.
That's right. It did. So she said, so they're at this meeting, Carl's presenting, and Mom said about halfway through, Hattie insisted they stop because people do not want to hear this. And he stopped. So he didn't give the whole presentation. So it's like, well, I wish I would have been there. No one invited me. I guess I wasn't an elder yet. So, they had really, really different personalities. And
that's for sure.
Right. So he squirreled everything away. And again, like, I wonder, if he was hoping that maybe someday he could tell someone or give it to somebody so that it could be, part of the history.
Yeah, I think he'd probably be really glad to know that we've dug through it and read so much of it and looked at it and figured things out.
So, yeah, because he was very, very social. He knew everybody.
Right.
I'm just sure that people would have wanted anyway.
Yeah,
but he was really, really sharp up until his late years. He could have contributed a lot, if.
Yeah, he really could. But unfortunately, he did leave a fantastic trail for us to follow.
Right. But that vessel is gone. So here we are trying to figure it out. So for your entertainment today, we have, because there were so many letters that Carl kept, I have, something to read for you. I also did a TikTok of this, which was very well received.
Yeah.
But so it's a transcription of a letter from Hattie to Carl in April of 1932. So just picture it.
I can't help laughing.
Here we go. So it's rural Maine, 1932, and there's two sweethearts that correspond back and forth every day. This was the day of letters. I mean, the time of letters. And they would write to each other every day about all the goings on, when we're going to meet. So it was like texting, but slow-mo, and it cost them 3 cents to mail every time they sent something. But so the gentleman keeps every single letter that she ever wrote, but only one of those letters was written in red ink. We call that letter the Butter Wars. Dun, dun, dun. So I'm just going to read a few excerpts from it, because you don't need to read the whole thing, but the gist of it is there was a butter problem. So the letter starts, "Hi, darling. I've got to tell you something I don't like to, so I'm going to do it right now. Last night when you said Roscoe wouldn't let you bring the butter until he see if there was enough to go around, or words to that effect. Well, Papa took it the wrong way. He said if our money wasn't as good as someone else's, that he could keep his old butter and he would get it somewhere else. See, understand? He said one would think he was giving us the butter. So he doesn't want it anymore. I don't like to write this, honey. You know that, and please don't blame me, dear. It's going to be hard for you. You better let your mother tell him. I just know he'll hate me more than ever, and he'll probably try to stop you from coming out altogether. Honey, I'm sorry it had to happen this way, but I must confess I was sort of peeved at first. The way I took it was, if he didn't have enough, he wouldn't let us have any. I was going to say something about it last night, but I knew, and so does Papa, that it wasn't your fault, so I didn't want to spoil our evening. But honey dear, please believe me that Papa isn't one bit cross at you, not a bit, honest. He's just mad at Roscoe. Has everything gone okay with you today, dear? I hope so. And I wish you'd come out, but I know that you can't. Gee, I hope Roscoe will let me go with you Wednesday. Probably, this is the end of the letter. P.S. Probably he won't want you to bring me any buttermilk now. If he doesn't, it's okay with me. You don't blame me, do you, honey? XXX. So that's the end of the letter. And so now we are left to wonder if they ever received any butter. Did she get any buttermilk? But whatever the answer was, things must have been ironed out as they were married in 1934, and her dad did not attend the wedding. So, like we said, she was a formidable person, and we attempted to name the letter segment with some funny titles. We couldn't decide, so there were a few choices.
Well, number 1 was The Great Butter Wars.
Or A Butter Dispute.
Or Bitter Over Butter.
Or Bitter Bitty.
And then Bitter Bitty Bemoans Butter.
Or Butter Wouldn't Melt in Her Mouth if she had any butter.
Or the Dr. Seuss-esque one, Bitter Butter Battle.
Okay, so we laughed a lot at these because their personalities are so different. We just had to name the letter something. And again, it was written in red ink, the only one out of 1,000 letters that was written in red ink.
All right. So please subscribe, rate, and review. We'd like to have your input, and we invite you to reach out with your tales and tell us what you've learned or found interesting in your family research at chasinghazelsTales@gmail.com.
And next week, we'll pick up with Hazel right after graduation as she starts her adult life. And so we still have many more stories. We're heading into fall. And if you're able to give, please head on over to the mainchildren'shome.org and check out their Christmas program. They take all kinds of donations, and I've been donating for the past few years in Hazel's name. It's a worthwhile effort. The Maine Children's Home has been continuously running since 1899.
So many kids that have a lot of needs, and it would be a great opportunity to give. So till next time, take care, and if you're wondering about your family history, take time to ask the questions of your loved ones. Don't wait. If you've done that, tell us that great story. We can't wait to hear it, and maybe we'll share it if possible.